Hey guys, welcome to another YouTube mini course. In this video we're going to look at the ins and outs of React.js. Alright, and React is actually one of my favorite technologies that I've worked with lately. And if you haven't used it, I definitely suggest really looking into it because it can change the way that you think of user interfaces and work with user interfaces. I'm working on a 10 project React course now. As soon as that's available, I'll put the link in the description. I also have an Intro to React and a React and Flux project course that you can check out as well. Alright, now we are going to jump in and look at some code, but I do want to just go over real quick just basically what React is and some of its advantages. Alright, so it's an open source JavaScript library for building dynamic user interfaces. And it doesn't have anything to do with the back end of your application, working with a database and so on. It's basically the V in MVC, okay, and Model View Controller. It's maintained by Facebook, Instagram, and a community of individual developers. So some advantages of React: it allows you to design simple declarative views for each state in your application. If you don't know what I mean by state, if we think of an email client, when you view your inbox, that's considered a state. If you were to click compose and then your editor opens up, that's another state. So React takes those states and allows you to create and manage views and components for them. Alright, so everything in a view is encapsulated in a component, and those components can have their own properties and state as well. If you want to get into more complicated application-wide state, you could look into Flux or Redux, which is an application architecture, but that's a little more complicated than what I want to get into today. Alright, so we'll be dealing strictly with React.js. React uses what's called a virtual DOM, or virtual document object model. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but basically it allows you to work with and render only certain parts of the DOM that you need. Another great advantage of React is it's completely independent of the rest of your app, as I said, so you can use it with pretty much any other framework or any other technology that you'd like. It also can render on the client or the server. You can use it with Node.js and NPM. As well as just including it in a script tag and using it right in your HTML files. So, as I said, React uses a virtual DOM, and it basically abstracts away the DOM and creates its own version, which is simplified and only includes the things that you need. Alright, it also helps us identify which parts have changed. So, when you update your component somehow and you want to basically re-render it, instead of having to refresh the entire application, React can take a look at what's changed and look at the original DOM and then just re-render that part that needs to update. Alright, so it determines how to upload the browser's DOM more efficiently, and it's also much more lightweight, and that makes it work a lot faster. Alright, so let's take a look at an extremely simple application or extremely simple component called Hello Message. And you can see that basically we have a class called Hello Message that extends React component. And inside here we have a method or a function called render, which is the only function that's actually required in a component. There's many more, and you can create custom functions, but render is required. And you can see we're returning what looks like an HTML element. This is actually JSX, okay, JavaScript syntax extension, which I'll talk about in a second. Basically what we're doing is saying hello, and then we have this dot property or dot props dot name. Alright, so this is a component property. Now down here we're using the React DOM to render it. You can see we're using this hello message, which is the name of the component, and we're passing in a property called name with the value of Jane. Alright, so right here would display whatever we pass in here, which is Jane. And then this parameter is where we want to insert the component in our HTML. So typically you'd have a div with the ID of app or root or something like that, and you would insert it right in there. All right. So JSX stands for JavaScript Syntax Extension, and it's a preprocessor step that adds XML to JavaScript. It looks much like XML or HTML. There are a few differences, and I'll go into that later on. But basically it defines a familiar syntax for defining tree structures with attributes. And it's not required, but is definitely recommended and makes things much easier. And later on I can show you an example of JSX and also the JavaScript that generates it, and you can see how much easier it is to just use JSX. So what you'll learn in this mini course: how to create a React application, how to create components, manage state and properties, handle events, work with forms and input, work with JSX. We'll take a look at some of the lifecycle methods, and also how to fetch data from an API and bring it into our component. Alright, so enough of these slides. Let's jump in and create a React application. Alright, so we're going to jump in and start to write some code with React.js. Now, as far as the application we'll build, it's a very simple project management app, but I don't really want you to focus on the functionality of the application, because my goal in this video is to show you the different parts of React and to teach you the fundamentals. Then you can move on to create your own applications and ideas. Alright, so if I go to the React website and click on Get Started, it takes us to a simple Hello World example. We want to click on this installation link right here. Alright, and there's a couple different, well, there's many different ways you can use React. You could even just include the two scripts here, React.js and React.DOM, right in your index HTML file, and work with React. But we want to be a bit more efficient and clean. So I used to use something like Webpack or Gulp along with the React plugins. But recently they created this tool, this Create React App command line tool, that will allow you to generate a React application in just one command. Alright, so this is definitely what I would suggest to use. It compiles everything. It compiles all the JSX. You don't have to worry about anything really. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and install that, and it needs to be installed globally. You do have to have Node.js installed, so if you don't have that, go to nodejs.org, download it, install it, and that'll give you Node along with npm. Alright, so once Node is installed, we're going to open up a command line, and you want to run npm install. Make sure you add the -g for global, and then create -react-app. Alright, I already have it installed, so I'm not going to run it, but just go ahead and run that. And then go to wherever you want to create your project. I'm in my C drive in my projects folder, and then we just want to run create-react-app, and then the name of your project. Okay, so I'm going to call this Project Manager. Alright, and it does take a minute or two, so I'm going to pause this and I'll be back when it's done. Alright, so that took about 2 minutes or so. Now we want to cd into Project Manager, and then all we have to do to run our application is do npm start. Alright, and then if we look over here, actually I don't know if it shows us, but to build it for production we can just run, I think it's npm run build, and that will just compile everything so that you can just take it and upload it to your server or whatever. Alright, so we ran the application and this is what we get. Okay, nice little landing page. I don't want to keep any of this stuff, for instance the logo and the styling, so I'm going to open up my folder in my text editor, and I'm using Atom, which I would recommend for React development. I find it really helpful. The code highlighting is really nice, and I noticed that with Sublime Text it doesn't pick up the JSX very well as far as code highlighting, but Atom works really well with it. And there's probably a plugin you can use for Sublime, but I just prefer to use Atom. Alright, so I'm going to just add my project folder here, which is in C drive, projects, and project manager. Okay, so this is what it gave us. Alright, so we have our package.json file. You can see that we're using React. Right now it's version 15.3.2 along with React DOM. And then our scripts, we'll just start the application as we just did. Build, as I said, that's used to compile everything. Test, eject, I've never actually used that. So now let's take a look in the public folder. We have an index.html file. I'm just going to get rid of all these comments to make it look a little easier to read. And basically all we need to know is that we have a div with the ID of root, and that's where everything is going to be output. Alright, you can go ahead and change the title if you want. You can say project manager, and we can save that. And now you can see the title's updated. Alright, now in the source folder, this is where all of our React stuff goes. If we look at index.js, we're importing React DOM. We have a main app component that we're importing, and then this index CSS file, which we don't need. I'm going to get rid of that. And then down here, we're doing our React DOM render, putting in the main app component, and then we're saying we want to insert it in the element that has the ID of root, which we just saw right here. Okay, so that's where it's outputting. So we can save that. We shouldn't need to touch index.js again, or index.html. Now app.js is basically the gateway to our main app component. So we're importing React. The logo and stuff, I'm going to get rid of this. I will keep the app.css import right here. And then we have our class with a render function, which is returning this here. Now it's very important to know that when you return in your render, everything has to be within one element. I couldn't have another div right here and return that. Alright, obviously we can have as many elements as we want inside the main div, but you can only have one div at the very top level. Alright, now I'm going to get rid of everything here except for this div. Alright, and let's just, for now, we'll just say my app. Okay, we'll save that. And then let's get rid of this logo SVG. We don't need that. And then app CSS, I'm just going to clear all that out and save it. So now we just have my app. Alright, I'm going to open up the Chrome Tools console as well, because we'll be working with that quite a bit. So now we have a blank React application, essentially. Now for this main app component, I usually use it as kind of a placeholder for all of our other components. Okay, we can import them and we can place them right here in the render. So we're going to have a folder inside the source folder called components. Okay, and we're going to create a new file in there, and we're going to call that projects.js. Okay, so this will be our projects component, and it will be responsible for listing all of our projects. Alright, now I'm going to copy everything we have in app.js because we need that same basic format. We don't need the CSS, we only need to include that in the main app component. Then we're going to change the class to projects. Make sure we export that down here so that we can use it in other files. This div, I'll change the class to projects, and let's just say my projects for now. Alright, so we'll save that, and then we'll go back into app.js, and let's import projects from, and that's going to be in the components folder / projects. Okay, we don't need the JS at the end. And then down here we can simply input projects, okay, just like we would in XML or HTML. Okay, we'll save that, and now you can see that we're getting my projects. So everything we put in the projects component is going to be output here. Now we can pass in properties here if we want. So for instance, if we say test and set that to, let's say, hello world, and then in projects we should be able to just go like that, output that variable, and test is not defined. That's because it has to be this.props.test. Okay, and then we get hello world. All right, just to show you that we can do that. Now, the idea that I want to do here is all of our projects are going to be held in state. All right, that's where our data needs to be held. Usually we would fetch it from some kind of API or database and then put it in our state, but we're just going to put the data right in our state. So what we want to do is we want to create a constructor. So right above the render, we want a constructor. All right, and this is where we want to define our initial state state keys. So if we say this.state equals, and we want to set projects, and then projects is going to be an array of objects. All right, so each one will have a title. So let's say business, website, and also a category. We'll just say web design. All right, so there's one project. Let's copy that. And we'll do 3. So business website, then we'll do social app, and that category will be, let's say, mobile development. And then let's do e-commerce shopping cart, and then that category will be web development. All right. Now we want to take this state and we want to pass it into projects as a property. All right, so basically you want everything at the top of your application in state and then pass it down to other components through properties. All right, the data should be immutable. It should go from the top down. So let's pass it in as projects, and we should be able to say this.state.projects. All right, so now if we go, we're going to get an error here, and it says this is not allowed before super. The reason for that is when we put a constructor in, we need to call super like that. Save it, and that goes away. All right, now in projects, if we go in the render but not in the return, and we do a console.log, and we say this.props, and now when I reload, you'll see we get our properties, and we have this projects with an array with all of our projects. So we can now access that from the projects component. Now when you have an array of objects like this, you usually want to create a separate component for each individual item, and then you want to basically map through those projects and output that component. So we're going to go ahead and in components we'll create a new file called projectitem.js. All right, we're going to copy everything we have in projects, paste it in there, and we'll change this to project item. And down here, make sure you export project item. All right, now for this, I don't want to return a div. I actually want it to be an li. Okay, each one will be wrapped in an li, and we'll give it a class of project. And by the way, if you're wondering why this says class name, is because in JSX you can't use class as an attribute. All right, class or for. If you're using a form with labels, you can't use for. You have to use HTML4. All right, so just try and remember that. So in here, actually, you know what? We'll leave that as is for now, and then let's go back to projects. And what we want to do is, let's see, we want to, trying to think of how I want to do this. Let's go above the render and let's just create a variable called project items. And then we want to test to see if there are any projects. So we'll do an if statement here. We'll say if this.props.projects. Then we want to take that project items variable and we want to set that to this.props.projects.map. Okay, since it's an array, we want to map through it. So in here, we're going to use an arrow function, You could use a callback, but I want to keep this basically an ES 2015. So in here, what we want to do is, first of all, let's do a console log and make sure that we're actually getting each project. Okay, so let's see, unexpected token. Expected parentheses. Oh, I put this in the wrong place. This needs to be within render. So we're going to put that right here. Alright, so now down here you can see it's logging each one. So this is working. We're getting each individual project. Now we want to, let's comment this out, and we want to return. And in here we're going to put our project item component. Alright, and then we want to pass in each project as a property. Okay, so we're assigning each project item to this variable right here. So down here we should be able to just put in project items, and we'll save that. Okay, so we also need to import the project item component that we created. So we'll say import project item from /project item. Okay, now we're getting this error that says each child in an array should have a unique key property. So this isn't an error, it's a warning, but it is a good idea to add a key to our project item right here. Usually if you have an ID you would use that, but we'll just use project.title. Okay, now nothing's being output up here because if we go into project item we haven't put anything here yet. So let's put, we should be getting project as a property that we passed in. Okay, right here. We're passing it in as a property. So let's say this.props.project.title, and then we'll also put the category. So this.props.project.category. Alright, we'll save that, and now you can see we're outputting all of our projects along with the category. Alright, let's wrap this in a strong tag. Alright, and we'll put a colon here. Okay, so it doesn't look great, but it is working. We're basically setting our state in our main app component. Okay, we have a state called projects. We're passing it into projects as a property, and then inside projects we're mapping through that array, and we're outputting a project item component which has each project where we output the title and the category. Alright, so hopefully you can see how this is coming together. Now, one thing I want to mention is in app.js, in our constructor, we set the state. This usually isn't where you want to set the actual data. You do want to define the state and the keys, but not the actual data. For that, you want to use a lifecycle method, and you'd probably want to use component will mount. Okay, so we'll say component will mount, and that should actually be lowercase. So this is a lifecycle method. It fires off when every time the component is re-rendered. So up here, let's grab these and cut them out. We do want to keep the projects, but just as an empty array in the constructor. Down here, we want to say this.setState, pass in an object, and we'll say projects, which is an array, and then we'll paste the data in like that. Alright, so let's go ahead and save that, and now you'll see it still functions, but this is just a better way to do it than to have it in the constructor like that. Alright, and if you do a for instance, an AJAX call. If you're fetching data from an outside API, you want to do that in this lifecycle method as well. Either this or component did mount. And if you go to the documentation for React, you'll see all the lifecycle methods and at which time they render or they fire off. So now what we want to do is we want to add a form so that we can add to our state, so we can add a project. So let's create another component and we'll call it add project.js, and let's copy what we have in projects. Okay, we'll paste that in. We can get rid of that. We're going to change the name to add project, get rid of that, change this down here to add project. Alright, now let's see, what do we want to render here? Let's keep the div. I'm going to get rid of the class name, and we'll put an h3 here. Let's say add project. Alright, so let's just make sure we can insert this into our main component. So we're going to go to app.js and import it, just like we did with projects. Alright, and then down here we'll put it right above, we'll just replace this my app. Save that. And now we're outputting that add project component. So we want this to be a form. Okay, so we'll put a form tag, and let's put in here a div. Okay, this will have a label of title and an input. Type will be text. And we're going to give this an attribute called ref, and that's going to help us get the value when we submit the form. Now you have to have this slash here. You can't use HTML5 syntax or you'll get an error. Okay, in the ref, let's just put title. Alright, so let's also put a BR here, and again, you have to have your slash. So let's copy that, paste that in, and then this is going to be the category. But I want this to be a select. Okay, so we'll say select. This will also have a ref of category. Alright, now what I want to do is I want the categories to be a property of the component. Alright, now we can set default properties if we go above render, and we're going to say static default props, and we want to set that to an object, and let's set categories to an array, and we'll say web design, web development, and mobile development. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to map through these and then output the options. So we're going to go above the return and render and say let category options. We'll set that to this.props.categories because we can now access that, and then we want to call .map. Alright, and then in here we'll say category, we'll use an arrow function, and then we want to return option. We're going to give it a key of category and a value of category. And then we also want to output the category here. Alright, so now we should be able to just use this category options right down here. Oh. Alright. Let's try that, and there we go. So now we're outputting all the categories. It's coming from the properties up here. Now, to submit the form, what we're going to do is in the form tag, we're going to add a handler called onSubmit. All right, we have onSubmit, there's onClick, there's a whole bunch of them. So we want to put some curly braces and let's say this dot handle submit. All right, so this handle submit we can create right up here. Okay, and just to show you, let's do console log. And we'll just say submitted. Now, I don't think it's going to work yet. Oh, we didn't even put a submit button. So no, it's not going to work. Type submit, value submit. Alright, so if we go and we try to submit this, you'll see that it's not console logging down here because it's actually submitting the form. What we want to do is pass in an event parameter here, and then just like in JavaScript or some other libraries, we can use e.prevent default, and that'll prevent the form from actually submitting. So now if we do it, you can see down here we get our console log. Now what we want to do is we want to store the data that we submit into state. So we're going to add a constructor up at the top. Alright, and in the constructor we have to call our super function, and then we're going to say this dot state, and we're going to have new project, which is going to be an object. So we don't want to fill it here. What we want to do is set it when this is submitted. Alright, now to grab the values of the form, we can use that refs attribute. Alright, so let's say console.log this.refs.title.value. Okay, so now if I type something in here and submit, oh, that didn't work. Let's see, what did I do wrong? Ref title. Oh, it doesn't know what this is. We actually have to bind it through the handle submit down here. We have to say dot bind and then pass in this. So now if we submit, you can see that it's console logging whatever I put in the title. Now we don't want them to be able to submit a blank title, so we can actually do a little bit of validation here. We'll say if this ref title value is equal to nothing, then we want to alert, and we'll say title is required. Alright, and then we'll have an else, and then we do what we want to do. So if we save that and we try to submit, we get an alert. Okay, now if everything works out, or if there's a title, we want to set the state. We want to put the data into this value. So we'll say this dot set state, and we want to pass in here new project and set that to an object. And let's see, we're going to set title to this dot refs dot title dot value, and then category to this dot refs category dot value. So that'll set the state for us. Now when we use this set state, it can take a second parameter, which will go right here. We'll put a comma, and that's going to be a callback function. Alright, and then here let's do a console log, and we'll log the state. So let's save that, and let's just say test web design submit, and then it gives us the state, which has the new project with that data. Alright, now I should have mentioned earlier that the state in this component is different from the state in the main app component. Okay, each component has its own state. But what we want to do is take the data we submit and pass it up into the main app component and save it in the mains in that state. So what we can do is we can send it up through a property, okay, through a function inside the properties. So what we'll do, let's comment that out. We'll say this.props.add project, okay, and then we'll pass along the new project. Now, since we did that, we should be able to access this from the main component. So we'll go down to where we have our projects, right? I'm sorry, the add project, and we're going to put a property. What do we call it? Add project. So we want to use that right here. So add project equals, and then we want a function to handle it. So this dot handle add project. All right, and we should just bind this as well. All right, and then we'll create that right here. Handle add project. That'll take in the project. And let's just do a console.log just to make sure that that works. All right, so let's see, what's this? New project is not defined. Let's see. Oh, I passed new project. This is actually in the state, so we want to say this.state.new project. So now if we put something in here and submit, this.props add project is not a function. Let's see. This.props.add project. Oh, this should be uppercase P. There we go. All right, so now we're submitting it, we're passing it up to this component and console logging it. Now, in here, what we want to do is we want to add it to the state of the main component. All right, so we can just let's see. With React state, your state is immutable, meaning that you don't want to change it. You want to basically update it. So we want to get everything that's in it, push the new project to it, and then set it again. So to do that, we'll say let projects. We'll set that to this.state.projects. So we're grabbing what's already there, and then let's take that and push onto it the new project, and then we'll reset it. So we'll say this dot set state, and then we'll say projects. All right, so let's save that, and now let's say test web development submit, and there it is. Oh, it says category. That's not right. Okay, so let's see what went wrong there. If we go to add project, oh, right here, value category, that needs to be wrapped in curly braces. You guys probably saw that already. All right, so submit, and there we go. If we say test 2, we'll choose mobile development, submit. So now we can add projects. Now this isn't going to get persisted anywhere if I reload. As I said in the beginning, React is for user interfaces. It's not going to persist the data. Now we could set it to push to some kind of API or maybe to local storage or something like that, but we want to just focus on the user interface part of it. And that's what's great about React, is that your back end is completely separate. So we could have this go to local storage, and then we could easily replace it with, let's say, MongoDB or something like that. All right. I'm going to put a heading above this so it's not so scrunched together. So in projects, we'll put an H3. We'll just say latest projects. All right, and I'll put a line break below this input as well. Whoops, I meant to put that right here. Okay. So it doesn't look too great, but that's fine. We're not focusing on that. So now what I want to do is I want to show you how we can delete these. Now, initially we don't have, if we look at our state, our projects, we don't have an ID, and it's a good idea to have an ID, a unique ID. And there's actually a module we can use called UUID. So let's see. I'm not sure where the documentation is for it, but we're going to go ahead and install that, and it just generates a unique ID for us. It's a really simple module. So we're going to go ahead and just stop this with Control-C and do npm install -- save UUID. Okay, and then we'll just restart, npm start, and we're going to come over here and bring that in. So import UUID from UUID, and then we'll just go down here. We'll assign an ID to UUID.v4, which is a function. So each time we use this, it'll generate a new ID. So we want one for here and here as well. Okay, and then when we add a project, we also want to do the same thing. We want to add an ID. So we'll import Alright, we'll use that right here where we set the state for the new project. ID dot v4, just like that, and that'll generate a unique ID for us. Alright, and just to make sure that we're actually getting an ID, let's go to our project item and we'll replace this title with ID, and you can see that it's outputting unique IDs. Okay, I'll put that back. Now I want to be able to delete these, so let's go in project item where we are now. We're going to put a link at the end here. Okay, now the link isn't actually going to go anywhere. We want to put an event, an event handler called onClick, and we'll set that to, let's see, what do I want to set that to? This dot delete project. Alright, we're going to do dot bind this as well. And then we're going to create that right here. Handle, whoops, not handle, what was it? Delete project. And let's just do console.log test, just to make sure that it actually works. So let's open up our console. If we click that, we get test. Now we want to do the same idea. We want to click on it in this component, but we want to pass it up to the main component and then do the final delete there. Now since we're in project item, we're actually 2 components deep, so we need to pass it up to projects and then pass it up to the main app component. Alright, now to do that, we're going to set a property, this.props. And we'll call it onDelete, and then we just want to pass in the ID. Alright, now to pass along the ID through this function, we're going to go after this right here, put a comma, and then we're going to say this.props.project.id. Alright, and then we should be able to access it through here. And then we'll pass it along. Alright, so let's save that, and then we're going to go to projects.js and go to where we have project item, which is right here. And Let's see, we want to add on delete here as well. Say this dot delete project, bind this, and we also want to create the function up here, delete project. Okay, takes in ID, and then again we want to do this dot props dot on delete, pass in the ID. Alright, so now we're passing it up to the main component. So down where we have projects, we want to pass in on delete. Okay, we'll set that to this dot handle delete project, and we'll do dot bind and then pass in this. And then just like we did with handle add project, we're going to add handle delete project. Alright, and that's going to take in the ID. And then the idea is, just like with add project, we want to get it from the state, and then we want to remove the project we want and then reset the state. Now we could do this in different ways. We could use a for loop or something like that, but we're going to use find index. So let's say let index, and we'll set that to projects dot find index, and we'll pass in here x, so x.id. And basically what this is doing, it's going to look through all the projects, it's going to find all the IDs and match them to the current ID that's being passed in. Alright, if it matches, then it's going to get put in the index. Then what we want to do is we want to say dot splice where that index is, and we want to delete 1 from that. And then we just want to reset the state just like we did up here. Alright, so let's save that. And now we should be able to click the X on one of these and deletes it. Okay, so we can now add projects and we can delete them. So we're pretty much there as far as all the basics. One other thing I want to show you is prop types, which is kind of like kind of a validation for our properties. So for instance, let's see, we don't have any in the main app component, but if we go into projects, into our projects component, we have, what do we have? Projects itself is a property, and then we have the function on delete, which is a property. So if we want to add kind of a validation for those, we can go down under the class and then say projects.propTypes, and let's say projects, and that's an array, so we want to make sure that it gets formatted as an array. So if we say React.propTypes.array, and then we have on delete, which is a function, so we can say React.propTypes.func. Now if we save that, nothing happens because it's correct. But if we were to, let's say projects, if we format that as a string, if it's supposed to be a string, now we're going to get an error saying that projects of type array expected to be a string. Okay, so it doesn't actually stop it from working, but it does give you this warning telling you that that property is the wrong type. Alright, so it's good practice to do this. Okay, now let's copy this and let's do that for project item as well. Project item, we again have on delete, and then we have the project, which is a property. So let's go down here and we'll change this to project item dot prop types, and we have project, which is an object. Okay, so we want to do that. And then on delete, which of course is a function. Save that. There's no errors because everything is correct. Now we'll do the same for add project. So for add project we have, let's see, we have categories, which is a property. And that's an array, so we're going to keep that. And then we have add project, which is, where is it? Right here, this .props.add project, which is a function. Okay, so that should do it. And there we go. Now I also want to show you how we can bring in other data from an outside API. So I'm going to close all of these except for app.js. And basically what I want to do is a dev API called JSON placeholder. And let's see, I want to get some to-dos. So you can see here, if we click on that, it gives us an API where we can get JSON formatted to-dos with an ID, a title, and so on. And we can make a GET request to that to-dos. So in our application, we want to make the request in a lifecycle function called component did mount. So we're going to add that here. Okay, we should actually put this in both component did mount and component will mount. So what I'm going to do is create a function called get to dos. And let's see, we're going to want to run that in both of these. So let's go here and say this dot get to dos. And we also want to run that here. And then for where we put this projects in state, I also want to create a function for that separately called get projects. And then all we're going to do is grab this, cut it out, and put it in here, and then we'll call it here. Just makes things a little neater. Alright, so everything should still work. Okay. Now in get to dos, this is where we want to make our requests. Now we can use many different modules to make HTTP requests, but I'm just going to use jQuery. Alright, so let's go ahead and install jQuery through npm. And you can use Axios is a good one, Super Agent is another one, but I just want to keep it simple. So let's go ahead and import jQuery up here. We'll say import $ from jQuery, and then back down in get to dos. Where is it? Right here. We're going to say jQuery.ajax. And we want to pass in here URL. Now the URL is going to be from the JSON placeholder, which will be this. So we'll copy that, paste that in. The data type is going to be JSON. Let's see, I'm going to say cache false. And then we have our success. Okay, so if everything goes okay, this will run. And that takes in the data that's returned. And then we also have, we need to bind this just like we do with the other ones, the other functions. We're going to say bind this. And then we'll put a comma, and then we're going to have our error in case there's an error. Alright, and then for that, that's going to take in an error. Actually, it's going to take in a couple things. It's going to take in an XHR, status, and error. And then all we want to do here is console.log the error. All right, now if everything goes okay, we want to take the data that's returned and put it into our state. So up in the state here, let's add to-dos, which will be an empty array. And then down here, we can say this dot set state, and we'll say to-dos, and we'll set that to the data. All right, and then let's put a callback, and then we can check the state. So console.log this.state. So since we have get to dos running in these lifecycle methods, it should run right when the app loads. So let's go back there and open up the console. And if we look at the object, we have our projects, of course, and then we have 200 to-dos. Okay, these are coming in from that API. So it's as easy as that to bring in data from an outside source and put it into our state. And then we can use that in the rest of our application. And just, I guess we can do that real quick. Let's create another component called todos.js. And we'll also create one called to-do item.js. And we're going to do kind of the same thing we did with the projects. So I'm going to copy what we have in projects and paste that in todos.js. Okay, we're going to change a lot of these to to-do. This will be to-dos. I'm not going to do the delete and adds though, I just want to list them. So we'll get rid of that. Let's change this. And I know I'm moving kind of fast, but I don't want this to take too long. Now we're going to pass in to-dos as properties, just as we did here. And then we'll say to-do items this.props.todos.map. Okay, then here we're going to return the to-do item component. We don't need the onDelete. And I believe the to-dos have a title. Let's check it out. Yeah, they have a title and an ID. So this can be to-do.title, to-do, whoops. Okay, down here, change that. We'll just say to-do list. All right, and then for the prop types, we don't need the onDelete. And then let's make sure we export to-dos. All right, so let's save that. And then in to-do item, we're going to copy what we have in project item, paste that in. Okay, we don't need the delete. Then here, let's call that to-do. Change that. We don't need a category, so let's get rid of that. It's just going to be the to-do. We don't need the link to delete. Change that. All right, so we'll save that. And let's see. Now in the main app component, we're going to import both of those. Or actually, we're just going to import to-dos. All right, and then we'll add that down here. Let's put an HR. Save that, and I'll probably get an error. No error, but we're not outputting anything. And that's because we didn't pass anything into to-dos. So we want to pass along the to-dos that we have in state. So we'll say this dot state dot to-dos, save it, and there they are. So those are all coming in from that API. So you can see it's easy to pull in data and just bring it into our state and then publish it down to components through properties. And we made a GET request, but of course we could also make POST requests, and we could submit data to APIs and to external databases and so on. Alright, so this is getting kind of long, so we're going to go ahead and stop here. We covered pretty much all the fundamentals of React. I do hope you guys learned something and enjoyed this. I will get this code up on GitHub, and I would also suggest checking out the 10 Project React course, which I'll have ready in a week or so. And then also I have a more simple Intro to React course, as well as a React and Flux course. Alright, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.